with us being able to talk about whatever we talk about because we don't have any strings attached to us, right? It's a lovely thing. There's a lot of closet, definitely in metalcore, even though it seems to be a really leftist-dominated sort of subgenre. There's a lot of closeted libertarians in it because they're like, well, if I come out and say some of that, man, that's basically the end of their career. And this is why I think they're so attracted to us, and why I talk about it all the time about the void that we just simply feel, and just being us. And people will come up to us like, man, you make music that I enjoy, but man, you adopt a philosophy that I adopt, and that's what takes it to another level. And again, there's people in these bands that are kind of closeted, but again, it's like they don't think that it's worth putting themselves out there like that, just simply because, yeah, you get a target on your back. You get a target on your back because it's against the norm in the industry.
Stand-up comic Dave Smith brought his comedy to podcasting in 2012, eventually hosting his popular podcast, Part of the Problem. He then made the jump from stage to screen as a regular on cable news shows and in his own comedy special, Libertas, which spent 3 weeks at the #1 spot on iTunes.
They went, why do they hate us? That's how clueless we were. We didn't even know there was a beef. Like, if you had asked us on September 10th, you were like, oh, what do Muslims think about America? You'd be like, that we're awesome? I don't know. Like, what else would they think? And then September 11th happened, and we were like, whoa! Like, why do they hate us? And then people were like, well, you've been bombing the shit out of them for decades. And we were like, what?
I'm obsessed with libertarianism, and so when I'm doing comedy, it just kind of comes out. And having the perspective of being an anarcho-capitalist, it gives me a different angle than just about any other comedian has on the topic of politics or government or even culture. And there's just a lot of golden material there. There's nothing that's more absurd and hilarious than the idea of the state. And it's something that everybody accepts, and that's like comedy gold.
Anarchists utilize podcasting and memes to spread messages further, bypassing corporate media.
I was trying to figure out a way that I could contribute to the liberty movement. So I just decided to podcast. I had been in music at one point and I understood recording, so I bought some very basic equipment and I laid out about 15 episodes of my basics of voluntarism and libertarianism and just started.
I never learned about guns, so I cover guns a lot in my channel and the content that I do. Now I love firearms and I love learning about it more, but growing up, it was something that I never had experience in terms of culture or anyone in my family or anyone around me. One of the biggest things that we're doing next in this partnership together is we're focusing on dispelling a lot of the myths that are being perpetuated in the media against gun owners specifically.
I was making memes for all different types of groups and pages of my own accord, because I just had some technical skill in Photoshop and like entertaining people. But it really started to take off when I was invited to join the Anarchy Ball team back in 2013.
Memes reach anybody and everybody. You see memes are obviously popular with younger people, but even older people, boomer memes, they're getting into it too. And it's just a seed. They're little seeds that float all over the place, and they just spike right into people's minds. And even if it's something that they disagree with in the meme, because usually memes are pretty extreme with the idea that they're trying to get across, and it bothers people or people really resonate with it, but it sticks in their head, and that's what I like a lot. That, and it's funny.
Throughout history, there have always been populations that live outside the reach of states. In Southeast Asia, millions thrive without a state to manage their lives. James C. Scott discussed these anarchist communities extensively in his book, The Art of Not Being Governed.
I'm a Southeast Asianist, and I was interested in the history of the relationships between hill people in Southeast Asia and lowland people. And the states exist in the lowlands. And historically, one thought that the people in the hills were, in a sense, the ancestors of the people who founded states, that they were the backward less advanced, had not discovered wet rice agriculture and Buddhism and so on. And it turns out that it's a much more complicated and much more interesting story than that. And here we're talking about an area of maybe 100 million people, spread all the way from the northern boundaries of Vietnam in the hills through Thailand, Laos, Burma, all into northeast India. And I contend, and I think the evidence is indisputable at this point, that historically most of the hills were populated by people who were not always there, but ran away from states in the valleys because of taxes, because of epidemics, because of wars, conscription, and so on. And there they were, if you like, fleeing states, and therefore, and they did, one of the things that they did was to create social structures that prevented states from arising among them. It's not that they didn't have order, it's not that they didn't have chiefs, but they had a whole system of preventing state formations.
In Cherán, Mexico, citizens abolished all political parties and disbanded the police.
It's a very great, very chill environment right now. And if you compare it to an event in the United States or Western Europe, any place in the first world, well, there's little to no security at all. And even that could make you wonder, what if there's a smart, lost soul out there that would think of harming everyone in any way? And that is easy. That's not going to happen because of one simple reason. You don't know who has a gun here.
Ya hay un cambio por el movimiento que se hizo entre nosotros. Y la verdad, pues es algo que nosotros mismos nos sorprendemos y nosotros mismos no nos explicamos.
In 2014, the Mexican Supreme Court ruled their system of government as constitutional, effectively ending a 4-year-long fight against political parties getting back into the community. It was a significant victory that validated their efforts to rebuild. To do so, it must build a thriving economy buoyed by lucrative exports and stable local businesses.
Los retos que enfrentamos es inculcar cosas nuevas a la comunidad, que se desarrolle más lo que es pues se puede decir la mercadotecnia, ¿no? Porque de hecho es un lugar virgen para los negocios.
Mutual aid is a practice that combines individualism with collectivism to meet the needs of working people. People in a locale pool resources to help each other when temporary help is needed.
These are very old structures. Mutual aid societies have been with us since the time of the Masons, the Elks, and all manner of other aid organizations where people came together, looked after each other throughout human history. And in fact, there were at one point 1/3 of the U.S. population at the peak of these arrangements was a member of a mutual aid society. So the fact that these disappeared came about for a couple of reasons. The first was that the welfare state really was ascendant in the 20th century, and these associations were crowded out. People could no longer afford to both pay taxes and be members of these organizations and hope to get benefits out of it. Instead, they became dependent on the centralized welfare state.
In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, one of the primary sources of healthcare and health insurance for the working poor in Britain, Australia, and the United States was the fraternal society. Fraternal societies, or friendly societies in Britain and Australia, were voluntary mutual aid associations. Over 1/4 of all American adults were members of fraternal societies in 1920. Fraternal societies were particularly popular among Blacks and immigrants. A fraternal society was a group of working-class people who formed an association and paid monthly fees into the association's fund. Individual members would then be able to draw on the pooled resources in times of need. There were a great many societies to choose from. Their most commonly offered services were life insurance, disability insurance, and lodge practice.